Reid, who, by the way, previously served for a California state senator. I'm so grateful for you sharing your Saturday to jump in on the story here, Tara, because, you know, we're looking at a lot of failures happening here. We're looking at an awful lot of heartbreak and millions of people very much let down as to what we're seeing now in Los Angeles and the surrounding area. A lot of information coming out about these numerous failures, from fire hydrants running dry, insurance companies suddenly dropping fire insurance for long-term residents, all sorts of political shenanigans, we understand. Your thoughts on who's to blame?
You know, and it's not even about blame, right? It's about accountability.
Yeah.
So let's look at accountability, because that's the key here. And yes, I worked for State Senator Jack O'Connell, who was brought up by Willie Brown. Willie Brown is kind of the kingmaker in California. He's the guy that brought Gavin Newsom along with the Getty family. And they've lifted him up into political power.
Yeah.
What has he done with that power? Well, for the last decade, he's been the lieutenant governor and governor with his eye on the White House.
Yeah.
What does he want? But is he worried about the safety of the public? Because let's face it, the government's basic responsibility is to protect the public and the infrastructure. Is that happening in this fire? No. Hundreds of people may be dead at this point. They're still counting bodies. There are many people left behind in these fires. I've been in a couple of wildfires, and I can tell you, you have seconds to get out. And if you're lucky enough to get your pets and go, and your loved ones with the clothes on your back, usually that's how it goes.
Please go on.
And Gavin Newsom, you saw in that clip, he was pretending to call Joe Biden. He's a bad performer at best. When I worked for Jack O'Connell, it was in the mid-90s. This problem has been going way back with the insurance companies, with corruption, with fraud.
It really goes back to the 90s.
That far, even beyond my tenure there. Before. And, you know, he's had plenty of time to try to mitigate this, to try to come up with the evacuation plan, to make sure there's water in the reservoir, to make sure, you know, that people have an evacuation route. And so why isn't this happening?
Where is the governorship here? You know, I mean, you know, the LA mayor, she was globetrotting in Ghana for a presidential inauguration. Very convenient timing for her, as our city's going down the drain. That mayor, by the way, she cut about $20 million from the city's firefighting budget. The head of the fire department also devoted a lot of her resources to so-called diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI programs. Do you think any of this could have contributed to what we're seeing now?
Absolutely. I mean, who cares who someone's sleeping with or what color their skin is? It's dependent on, can they fight a fire? Can they come up with plans for public safety? And that didn't happen. And the question is why? Well, you know, there's some theories on that, right? 2028, Los Angeles is hosting the Olympics. 2028, Gavin Newsom has his eye on running for the White House again. So what all is there going to be a land grab, Rory, on this most valuable land? Some of these homes were worth multi-millions. Some were apartment complexes. You know, LA, to give you some topography, is a suburb in search of a city. So you have vast areas of, you know, nature, as well as neighborhoods, you know, churches, restaurants, all of that we've seen go up in flames. And, you know, I've gotten, you know, text messages from friends who have lost their school, their work, their homes. They're left with nothing. And you mentioned the insurance companies. A few months ago, State Farm dropped over 1,000 policies, apparently, allegedly, and in the Pacific Palisades area.
It's got to be illegal in some way. Sorry to jump in, Tara, but I'm astonished. I'm astonished that they can do this even a week or 2 weeks before these historic fires. All these insurance companies suddenly cut out or deleted or cancelled these fire insurance contracts with all these different people who've been living there for long-term residents, by the way, who've been living there for decades. By the way, you look at what's happening there now. Some people are saying, Gavin Newsom, he's a big fan of Klaus Schwab. Now we're going to have a 15-minute city where you will own nothing and be happy. Now, look, even as these houses are being destroyed, the land is still really valuable there, Tara. What do you expect to happen in the areas that are now an apocalyptic wasteland?
I think that there's going to be rebuilding, but not by the people who live there, who it's their birthright. They've lived there 30, 40, 50 years, some of them. No, they're not going to get it back. It's going to be a land grab is what's going to happen. And what was really astonishing, too, about the way the money was cut, besides the millions that were cut, they gave valuable equipment to Ukraine. Why is a city fire department giving equipment to Ukraine, to a foreign country. Again, this goes back to how Americans are so frustrated with their own infrastructure falling apart. And millions of dollars being taken from them. And so now, you have some louder voices with some of these celebrities that lost their places, really sounding the alarm and even flipping on, they were Democrats themselves and now they're flipping and saying, hey, where's the leadership? What's going on?
You talk about this firefighting equipment that, as I understand, was sent en masse to Ukraine. They sent all this firefighting equipment to Ukraine. At the same time, the mayor is cutting the firefighting budget. They're not doing the annual raking of the leaves. It used to be back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I know in the early 90s, every year they would come out with these teams of workers and rake up the dry bushes, rake up the dry leaves. I've seen reports saying that hasn't happened now in 3 years. It's just been a tinderbox waiting to blow. You talk about Gavin Newsom and his White House aspirations. I'm not surprised about any of that. I wouldn't be surprised if Kamala tried to become governor of California and Newsom goes to try and become the next, Democratic president there in the White House. Meantime, this catastrophe is evoking criticism of LA, the authorities, but we're seeing looters now. Looters are apparently storming some of the areas now, and the law enforcement isn't there to protect these businesses.
Well, right, like in some of the areas that are burned, there's nothing left to loot, okay? But in the areas that are not burned, that are under like watch or whatever, there's no protection for them because all the law enforcement is taken. But also we need to be careful with Western media because Western media is trying to distract away from Gavin Newsom's lack of leadership. And it's more than incompetence, it's criminal negligence in a lot of people's. And a lot of people are calling it criminal negligence when you have people that are dying, people that are losing everything, when their minimum job was to protect and at least have water available, to have water in the reservoirs, to have equipment for the firefighters, to have enough firefighters instead of cutting. And then, it was mentioned right before we did this segment that a memo has now been revealed that Bass was even going to cut more. More millions.
Tara, look, California, as I understand it, it is or it was the fifth largest economy in the world. You would imagine with so much wealth in that part of America and such a powerful economy that everything would be pretty well taken care of. I mean, are we looking at corruption in certain political levels, business levels, these circles of elite, or what?
I noticed the corruption in the mid-'90s when I was in California. I noticed the corruption with the insurance lobby. I noticed the corruption with, we were talking about the speed train, right? The bullet train was supposed to go from Northern California to Southern. Millions of dollars were spent on that. To this day, I couldn't tell you, Rory, where those millions are. And this was under Gavin Newsom's watch as well. There's so much money missing. There's never been a proper audit. And so now what you see is apocalyptic things like this happening where mismanagement, corruption leads to loss of life, loss of property, and damage that cannot, be hard. Because, look, people coming back to this, right? Let's say you have insurance and your insurance didn't get dropped. Even if your insurance didn't get dropped, permits in LA to build are so hard to get. It takes years to build one property. So it's not going to be easy for these residents unless you're a commercial and unless you, what they call grease the hands, meaning there's bribes. So a few years ago, there was an entire town near Los Angeles in Downey where the entire city council was taking bribes and money for permits and things like that. So you have a lot of corruption in Los Angeles. And a lot of it goes back. And then, of course, you have water rights issues where in 1994, one family bought 60% of the water rights of California.
I saw that.
It's a very big problem. So again, California's corruption, like our federal corruption, it all needs to be brought to light.
Yeah, it really, really does. I mean, draining the swamp on the East Coast and perhaps the West Coast as well, Tara. Just quickly, these insurance companies suddenly, days before these fires, they're suddenly dropping fire insurance for so many people. I remember I lived in Florida for a number of years. It was like Hurricane Alley down there. And I had hurricane insurance on my pad. And a hurricane blows in, it leveled the home where I was living. And I called up the insurance people and said, I have hurricane insurance. Can you rebuild my home, please? And they said, no, because hurricane insurance only covers tidal waters coming in, but it doesn't cover the wind damage. Well, it was the wind that leveled my house. You know, so that's the, you know, the way they kind of, it's so dirty, isn't it? You know?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is what's been happening to some of these victims, like in the Grass Valley fire in California, where the insurance companies would, even if they had the insurance in place, would find these little loopholes.
Exactly. It's so dirty. It's so dirty.
It is. And then, of course, you have the arson issue that's going on right now. In the Kenneth fire, they've arrested someone, right?
Right. They have. He was going around with a little blowtorch, apparently, and you see these people losing their homes, losing loved ones. I saw footage of a huge number of horses running down the streets, surrounded by fire, and I mean, it was just heartbreaking to see what's happening there.
You know, running through embers, with a horse. And I can tell you, because I have a horse, and I've had to evacuate him twice. It is not easy to get a horse out of a fire.
A panicked big animal like that.
They're 1,000 pounds, you know, and they're not really happy. Although usually in that situation, you put a scarf over them and you just run, and they tend to, like, they're flight animals.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and so a lot of times people were opening the gates and just letting the animals run.
Well,
that's the best thing to do.
I just couldn't watch it, frankly. But I wanted to just quickly get your comment on this. Joe Biden, he finally flies into town, right?
Yes.
He makes a very, very brief comment, and instead of really empathizing with the people and saying, we're so sorry, we're going to help you with everything, he comes out and says, hey, I just became a grandfather. I've got a son or a daughter.
Yeah. A great grand,
You know,
he never has been able to read the room. Even when he had all his mental faculties, he never could. He's a megalomaniac. And I mean, that was really stark. You saw Gavin Newsom's face, and you saw even Gavin Newsom with, you know, he got it. And I think, there was a joke about where all the money went, and it went into Gavin Newsom's hair gel.
That's right. That's right.
That's what Mel Gibson made.
Mel Gibson was saying,
Yeah, it's really been stark and awful, but hopefully the corruption will be exposed. And Gavin Newsom, I think his eye on the presidency, it's over. You'd imagine for him to
he's not going to live down from this one for quite a long time, Tara. But let's hope Trump, when he's coming in, I mean, I'm not, you know, stupidly optimistic, but I hope that he can drain the swamps all across the United States of America and try and get rid of this awful, awful corruption. Tara Reid is our contributor on this story. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.